Hello, welcome back to Surface Explore Record, where I'm using AI and a three-step methodology to build an application that I'm calling TaskFlow. It's a simple task management application, but I'm building this application to show you how you can work with AI to surface decisions, explore options for those decisions, and then record your decisions to use as specifications later when you build the application with AI. Now, what's important here is not the documents that we create, but it's the decisions that goes into those, because those will help the AI know what we want instead of the AI just silently choosing and making decisions for us. Now, I know that sometimes people look at this methodology and say, but it's so much slower than just prompting the AI and say, make me an app that does X. But this will speed things up at the end when you're ready to deploy, when you're ready to extend with new features, when you're ready to support. Having all this documentation and these decisions made at the beginning will help you speed up that process. So we're currently in the planning stage. In the first 6 episodes, we went through the idea phase, where we looked at the business and product requirements and what goes in, the decisions that goes into those documents. In the next episode, we looked at the design phase, and we looked at the decisions and the documents that make up the design phase. In the previous episodes, we looked at the architecture phase, where we actually looked at the technical requirements and the architecture decision records that will be used quite a bit today in order to make our implementation plan. So now we're in the planning phase. What we're doing now is we're going to build a plan to help the AI know what we want to build, what order we want to build, what's included, in other words, what's in scope and what's out of scope. Now, for my particular application, I'm just building the MVP, the minimum viable product. So there's no part really here that's out of scope or in scope. Everything I've talked about is in scope. If you wanted to save some features for later, say you wanted to build an MVP to prove some idea, then you would deliberately define that here in the planning stage. But instead, we're going to build the entire TaskFlow application, and we're going to build the implementation plan for that in this episode in the planning stage. And this shows you how we're going to use the AI to surface those decisions, explore options for the decisions, and then record those so that in the next phase, we'll actually begin building using that implementation plan. So let's go over to VS Code and Claude Code, and we'll get started. Okay, now here we are in a terminal in a VS Code, and I'm running Claude in the terminal. It works if you use the Claude extension also. But what I'm going to do is just remind you, first of all, that we have our business decisions and documents. We have our product level decisions and documents. We have our design level decisions and documents. And we have our technical level decisions and documents. These will play a big role in what we're about to do. So remember, in this episode, we're going to build an implementation plan. Now, if you just prompt the AI to build something, it will build its own implementation plan, but it doesn't mean it's the way that you want to implement it. So I'm going to start with the prompt. And again, just like I did in the previous episodes, and I'm going to tell the AI, this is where you can find the information that you need to begin building this implementation plan. Now notice, I don't tell it to build the implementation plan. Instead, I'm asking it for options. What are some options for building TaskFlow? What are some different ways that it can be built? Give me some different types of implementation plans. Remember, the whole point of this is using the AI not to just do what it wants to, but to give me options so I can choose what I want it to do. So let's get Claude started, and I'll return in a few minutes when it has given us some options for our implementation plan. Okay, and Claude is finished. Claude has given us 5 different build sequences or plans that we could use to build TaskFlow. Let's look at them. The first one is to build the back end first, make sure the API is complete. The second one is front end first with mock, so using mock data, mock APIs, but you get the front end. The next one, we have vertical slices. So in this one, we're building the full stack one feature at a time. Then we have foundation first, then features. So we do, like it says, do all the plumbing first, and then we start adding features one at a time. And then outside in, end-to-end driven. So here we're doing the end-to-end customer journeys as a method for building the plan. Now, those would all be fine. Notice Claude gives us a recommendation of a hybrid of option 4 and option 3. But let's say I'm going to show you how you can work with this to to explore some different options. So let's say that you're working on a project, whether it's your own project or somebody else's, and you know that you really want to see a UI as soon as possible. Now, I know that there's one option here, option 2, that gives us the front end first, but are there other options? So let's ask Claude, what if I want to see the UI as soon as possible in case I decide to make design changes? Would there be other implementation options that we could use? So I'm going to ask Claude now to give us other options, not just the first 5, that would show us a UI as soon as possible and then build the back end and all the connecting plumbing later. So let's come back when Claude is finished adding additional options to our implementation plan. Okay, I'm back. Claude is finished and has given us 3 additional options for how to build, how to implement TaskFlow. Both of them start with the UI, or at least UI components, so that we can see what it looks like at the beginning. Now, one thing this is good for is if you decide, I'm not 100% sure about my design. I want to see how it works, how it looks, how it feels before I make that final decision. Then doing UI first can help with that. So here again, Claude has given us 3 different options to see the UI, or at least the UI components at the beginning. Now, there's one other thing that's very popular lately, and that is running implementation in parallel. So whether this is like one developer running multiple AI instances in parallel, or if it's multiple developers, each running one implementation, running different implementation tracks. And this is very easy to do with things like Claude Code or with other AI coding agents, and with GitHub workflows or GitHub work trees or GitHub features, so that each person can work on one part at a time without overriding each other's work. So in this time, I'm going to ask, okay, I'm considering building TaskFlow in parallel sessions. Can you give me some ideas about how you could do this with parallel tracks? Again, Claude is going to look at my implementation, what I'm building. It's going to find what it can safely put in parallel so that they can be done in different tracks by either one developer in different AI sessions or by different developers with using their own session. So let's take a break and we'll come back when Claude is finished again. Okay, we're back. Claude is finished. It's given us 3 additional options for implementation plans for TaskFlow, assuming we're going to use parallel tracks to build a TaskFlow. Now, it's very important that you read through these whenever your AI gives you these options like this, because it could be that even though you're doing parallel tracks, it could be that there's an initial track or initial phase that has to be done before everything else. So it's very important that you understand the dependencies, which tracks depend on other tracks. And if you finish those dependencies, test them, make sure it works before you continue. So again, Claude has given me 3 different tracks, and it's revised this recommendation each time. In reality, I don't want to do this demonstration of TaskFlow in parallel. I don't want to do UI first. I really want to go back to the very first option that Claude created for us. I'm a back-end guy, so I want to start with a back-end first, build the API complete. This is very important to me because it makes sure that the contracts are clean, everything is ready, the schemas are ready before we begin building anything on top of that foundation. So I'm going to ask Claude to use option 1, back-end first API complete. I want to ask it to create a detailed implementation plan based on that. Now here's what's really important. Once it creates the plan, I'm going to ask it to compare that plan to the documentation that I've already created. These specifications are extremely important. And I'm not going to just do this here. I'm going to go back to this over and over again to make sure that what Claude is doing, make sure what the AI is doing matches what I want it to do. Now that I have all these documentations, all these specifications, I can use this as a gauge. I can use this as an answer key to say, are you actually doing what I want you to do? And then once it creates the plan, once it compares it to my specifications, revises the plan to make sure it matches the specifications, I'm going to ask for a implementation status file. This is going to become very important later, especially if you have to build over multiple sessions so that you know where you are, that you can show the AI where you ended up, and you can pick up from that point. So let's get Claude kicked off in creating our implementation plan, and then I'll come back when it's done. Okay, we're back. Claude has finished creating both our implementation plan and our implementation status file that we'll use to track the implementation. Let's take a look at them briefly. The implementation plan is quite extensive. Notice that we get some introductory material. If we ever want to share this with anyone to let them understand what we're doing, we get a list of the reference documentation. We get a list of the, let me open this a little more. We get a list of the sequencing principles, and now we get a phase map. This is really important. We can see that there are parts A through I, and then each part has different phases. But this isn't all of the plan. If I go down to the detailed phase, look at phase 0, we get a list of all the tasks that are going to take place as part of phase 0. Now we have a way to direct the AI to build exactly what we want it to build. And notice that there are references all along that tell the AI why we're doing it this way. And these refer back to architectural decision records, technical design documents, other design documents, other decision records, and those become very important as we build our product. Now let's look at the implementation status file. This is a way that we're going to track it. Notice that this time we have a summary that included what the phases are, how many are complete, how many are in progress, how many are blocked. And again, we have a checklist. At each part, we have a checklist, and we can look right away what's been complete, what hasn't been complete. You don't have to worry, did the AI do that? It's right there. It'll check it off for you if you instruct it to. Now, I don't want you to ever just take AI's word for it. You should always review. You would want to review that in more detail than I just did. But there's another step that you can take at this point. And I'm going to show you one of the things that I do when I have an implementation plan. I want to make sure that implementation plan is consistent with the decisions and the specifications that I've already supplied. In this case, if you remember, I did not create, say, an API endpoint guide. I didn't create a database schema document, but I did create a page inventory, a screen inventory, along with the data contracts that go into each one. So I'm going to instruct Claude to compare my implementation plan with the screen inventory document that I composed a couple of weeks ago, and make sure that they are consistent. And if it finds any inconsistencies, to fix them. Now, I would not recommend doing this just for this one document. Instead, it's worth it to take the time right now to review everything and make sure that everything is consistent. It's possible that as you go through these, you'll find some inconsistencies in your previous documentation. That's fine. You can update that as well. The point is, you want to make sure that everything is consistent, both internally consistent and also consistent with your other specifications. So let's take a break while Claude is comparing the screen inventory with the implementation plan, and then I'll come back. Okay, so we're back. Claude is finished. Notice that it did find some inconsistencies. It reconciled those. There's one item it said it didn't change. All this information is tracked in the implementation plan and in the implementation status file, and we can go back and review that. Now, in the prompt for this episode, you'll find that on the GitHub. I added another prompt that would allow you to compare this to the technical design document. I'm not going to show that here because it's the same process, but take a look at it. So far now we have the implementation plan built, and in the next episode, we'll begin using that plan to begin building TaskFlow. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you in the next episode.